There's several ways to varnish your miniature. There's three that I've used. I've used spray can, which I don't recommend. I don't like the spray can because you risk frosting if you don't do it right. And the other two ways is this Vallejo matte varnish and using your airbrush with these products shown right here on how to varnish your miniature with. I prefer mission models. You get a lot more in the bottle and they work wonderful. And I use this cheapo Spirit Air Wish.com airbrush that I got on Wish.com to do it with. It's just a cheap brush. You want to set your air compressor between 20 and 30. This will put enough pressure, and it's really thin, so it's going to come out a lot. So you want to hold your airbrush back from the models. So this is the matte varnish, the Vallejo matte varnish that I use. I use just an old dirty brush, and I do very thin coats when I'm brushing this on to a miniature. And that's one way I do it. But the main way I paint or I varnish my miniatures is with an airbrush. So I really wouldn't recommend the spray can. I've used it several times before, and there's a lot of prep work you got to do with that spray can. And you got to have the right weather conditions and stuff like that. And I've had so many frost, I just don't take the risk anymore. So here's a closer look at the Spirit Air, a no-nonsense airbrush I got off Wish.com. It was pretty cheap, so I think it was 25 bucks. And it was just a cheap airbrush to do this varnishing with. And the cups on the side, which I've never really seen that before on an airbrush. I've got badgers and stuff like that. But this one I mainly use, and it cleans up and it works every time. So we're going to get the materials out here. I'm going to show them to you. Q-tips. Always have some Q-tips. I'll show you what that's for later. Some airbrush cleaner. You definitely need that to clean out the front of the airbrush. I have a Mission Models polyurethane and a thinner. It's always a good idea to whatever varnish you use. You want to use their product. Like if you're using Vallejo, use the Vallejo paint thinner or the Vallejo airbrush thinner for that. But these are the Mission Models. And I use two different kinds. I'm going to first put on the semi-gloss, and then I'm going to put on a matte flat clear coat over the top of the semi-gloss. It's just two types of protection that I use. The semi-gloss goes on first, and then the flat clear is like a matte varnish. Will go over the top. So the whole point of that polyurethane, I have this little area right here where I put the models when I airbrush and things like that. But the whole point of that polyurethane that Mission Models makes is it makes it slippery. That's the best way I can describe it. It makes it slippery in your airbrush. It makes it flow better. You could also use some flow improver, which helps. So you grab your models. These are the Orlock models for the game Necromunda Underhive. And I use these Venom Steel Industrial Latex Gloves. They're wonderful. I've got big hands. So we'll put our gloves on our left hand, is whatever hand you're going to touch the model with. That's usually typically what I put it on. So the first thing we're going to start with is the semi-gloss clear coat. We're going to give that a good shake. It has a ball inside to help it shake up better and move the liquid around inside, but give it a really good shake. The thinner you don't really have to shake, but I do anyway. And then we also have some airbrush cleaner, like I was saying, with the Q-tips. I put a little lid down, and then I take a Q-tip, set it to the side, and I put some airbrush cleaner just a little bit in the lid there for the Q-tips. And the reason for this is you can clean out the front of your airbrush if it gets a little clogged, because it will happen from time to time, whether you're painting or whether you're using paint or whether you're using varnish. So I set that up right away. And you also want one of these filter canisters. This is to spray your airbrush so all the fumes will be filtered. You want to check your air pressure. And we're going to take our thinner first. I always take the thinner first. Well, sometimes I take the other thing, but I recommend taking the thinner first, putting 4 drops of the thinner to 20 drops of the varnish. That's about how much I use at a time. About a quarter of a cup of varnish in there, basically. If you're counting, that was a little big drip at the end there. But I'll cover it up. I'll spray it. And what happened here is I was getting no air pressure, so that was not bubbling inside the cup. And I was like, well, I figured this out. What ended up happening is the little handle that you press and push the air out was not engaged. So I had to take the back part of this off. I'll figure it out here in a second in the video. I'll have to take the back part of it off, take the needle out, and reset the needle inside. You always want to check and make sure it's coming out. If you've got air, that means there's some sort of clog in the cup. Just a little suggestion on troubleshooting, I guess, the airbrush. The handle wasn't engaged on the plate that pushes the handle forward. So that's what I figured out happened. So tried a few times, but eventually I get it to work for sure. There we go. All right, so I worked it out. There we go, and you can see how it's bubbling inside the cup there. That's you want to put your finger on the tip of the airbrush and blow some air through it to where it bubbles and mixes that up. You also want to stir it in there in the cup to make sure it's stirred, and then test it out in your hand or on a board. At this point too, I would want to point out before you start airbrushing anything, use a respirator. You don't want that stuff in your lungs. So I'm testing it out on the board here. I can see that it's coming out, and I adjust my pressure, and I stay, because we have so much and it's such a thin type of paint or varnish, you want to stay back away from the miniature, probably a good 2 inches, 3 inches. Sometimes in some points you'll be able to see it come out of the airbrush itself. And if you have your air pressure up pretty good, it'll come out pretty fast. But go all the way around the miniature when you're doing this. You get the underneath, you get overhead. And this, another benefit to airbrushing varnishing with an airbrush is it dries really quickly, and they're thinner coats, so you can do multiples, so you have no chance of it frosting over, typically. But make sure you get it from the top, make sure you get it from the underneath, the underside, make sure you get the base. You can go on and brush it on the edge of the base later on if you'd like. I usually do. That's where I mainly grab my miniatures from. But I'll show you an example. And you can see there's a little bit of a shine to it. That's the semi-gloss. And the flat clear will clear that up once I add that. So we're just going to go right through these. So now we got them all varnished, and we want to switch to the flat clear, the matte varnish from Mission Models. So we're going to clean out what's left in the actual cup itself, just using a paper towel. Being careful not to get big chunks of paper towel in the cup. We're going to throw some Airbrush Cleaner in there, a little Airbrush Cleaner. Turn our pressure all the way up to about 60 and spray that right through the needle. Clean it off real good, basically, is what we're trying to do here. Get all the paint, the semi-gloss cleaned out of there. There is a quicker way of switching paints, and I will show you guys in a second. But I'm just using the air filter, spraying all that airbrush cleaner out of the airbrush itself. There's a quicker way, and I do it anyway just because. Oh yeah, wipe your cup out one more time to make sure you get all that airbrush cleaner out. But the quicker way would be just taking a simple household product that I swear by, called Windex. And you can actually switch between colors as long as they're in the same kind of family, just by spraying some Windex in there and cleaning it out, mixing it up really in a quick fashion if you want to change colors really quickly. And you just spray all that out. I usually use it in the filter can there, or filter jar right there. These things are really inexpensive, but I'm going to tell you, it keeps the smell of the fumes down significantly. So that's what you use to switch colors out. Just a little quick tip: if you got an airbrush, just grab some Windex. Also, you can grab some Lysol. It's like a Lysol lemon all-purpose cleaner. If you're really gunked up on your airbrush to clean it out, but that'll be a different video. So I wipe it out again with the towel, and I can just go straight to my flat clear coat, and we'll mix it up real good, or we'll shake it up really well. Almost forgot to do that. And notice I'm putting this in first instead of the thinner. It just goes to show you, it really doesn't matter in which order you do it, because it all mixes up together, but I'd recommend putting the thinner in first. That way it's on the bottom and it mixes a little bit easier. I just did it backwards. It's no big deal. There's no particular order in which you do it, because you're still going to mix it up. So we'll do 4 drops to about 1/4 cup, or 20 drops of the flat clear matte varnish. And what this is going to do is, at this point, the semi-gloss has got them pretty shiny. This will just bring down that shine. You won't get rid of it completely, but it's not what I'm after. If I wanted flat, I would just use the flat clear, because it's wonderful just by itself. I think the semi-gloss gives sci-fi miniatures just a little bit of a shine, and they look better that way. Not only that, I think the glossier the varnish, the harder it is, the tougher it is. So I usually use it as basically like an undercoat. So make sure your gloves are clean and don't have crap on them. And this one, I'm not getting as close as I was with my airbrush. I'm using an overall spray, basically, of the flat clear, staying back maybe 3-4 inches, something like that, and doing more of a broad spray with the airbrush. And I believe I adjusted my air pressure to a little bit higher on the airbrush to do a more focused spray. But we'll just go through these and give them a once all over coat, and they should be all protected and ready to go for your oily fingers. when you're adding the new varnish, when you run out like we have here, you mix it up real good, and now would probably be a really good time to take that airbrush cleaner and a Q-tip and clean out the front of the airbrush where the needle is. Don't press real hard, just give it a little twirl and it should be good to go and good and clear. So I just had one more model there, even though I added enough to do these guys again, or to varnish these guys once again. I actually have some other models that I was varnishing tonight, so I went and grabbed them off the shelf after these guys were done and varnished them. All right, there you go. They're all finished. They're all varnished. Didn't take long at all. I think the total process was maybe 10-15 minutes. And as you can see, they are protected. They will have a different feel when you pick them up too. You'll notice that they'll feel like they are protected. I don't know how to describe it other than that. But that's all I got for you guys. I hope you got something out of this video. This is how I varnish miniatures. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Please tell a friend. And last but not least, from me to you, ta-ta, and I'll catch you in my next video.